Hello and welcome to The Digital Orphanage. I've come on a long journey with these dragons, but they've overstayed their welcome. It's time to give the remaining dragons a thorough health check and find new owners for them. One test is to run a RAM check, written in BASIC by Richard, who runs dragondata.co.uk. It tests 12k of lower RAM and all 16k of upper RAM. It's available in several formats, and here I'm loading it via a WAV file. Richard has also made a YouTube video explaining its use. Links to that are in this video's description. There's not much to see when it runs. Each memory location is checked in turn, and hopefully it reaches the end with a "no fault found" message. But on this dragon it declares a fault. It wrote a 0 into a memory location, but read back a value of 32. As the test halts on the first error, you can simply change line 200 to start at the next memory location and see if it finds any more. In this case it doesn't, and location 27773 is the only one faulty. A memory location is made up of 1 byte or 8 bits, but this isn't contained in just one memory chip, but made up of 1 bit from each of 8 memory chips. With the value of 32 returned, we can tell that the 6th bit is stuck on. To demonstrate, if we poke a value of 4, only the 3rd bit should be switched on, but when we read the location we get 36, as both the 3rd and the 6th are on. Similarly, 128 should only switch on the 8th bit, but as the 8th and the 6th are now on, we read back 160. Finally, writing a value of 255 switches on all 8 bits. As it reads back as 255, we know that none of the bits are stuck as 0. Richard provides a handy diagram showing which IC contains the faulty bit. In this case, it's IC38. The other fault I noted on this dragon is the clear key needs a good hard press before it'll work, so we'll check that too. Looking at the solder joints for the clear key, it's clear they've failed. So let's clean them up and get some fresh solder on them. This is the closest memory IC I could get. It's the same type but with a faster speed rating. It should work fine though. Although it's possible to unsolder an IC on a dragon, as each pin is soldered on both sides of the board, it's quite tricky. So the easiest way is to snip off the faulty chip and unsolder each pin individually. Then it's a case of wicking up the remaining solder and cleaning with IPA before soldering in the new IC. A neat replacement, but has it fixed the issue? Thankfully yes, and the clear key works too. Between repairs it's been fun to continue exploring the Dragon's game collection, and all game footage shown is captured from one of the Dragon 32s I've refurbished. The first game we'll look at is Wizard's Quest. Released by Microdeal in 1986. You play the wizard's apprentice, and have been set a deadly rite of passage to become a wizard yourself. Within a haunted mansion, you must battle ghosts and use the objects you find. The title music suitably sets the scene, and thankfully the game gives you some control over the difficulty level. These are all the control instructions you're given though, with nothing printed in the cassette inlay. One thing missing from here is if you press the P to pause the game, you'll need to press R to resume, otherwise it looks like the game has crashed, because P does not unpause. As soon as you enter a room, ghouls will appear that will drain your life energy. In fact, just being in the mansion drains your energy, as the percentage ticks down rapidly in the bottom right corner. So straight away there's a constant pressure for you to explore to find food and spells to restore your health. If you're desperate, you can flick between two rooms to pick up the randomly generated objects to restore your health. With one eye on your health percentage, you run through the passages searching for objects. There is one room that gives you a shopping list of items that you must bring back to that room. I presume this is how you must complete the game. And if you want to complete this game, mapping is essential. I'm not sure how many rooms there are, but I mapped over 70 without getting too far into the game or finishing it. Some doorways are open, but some require a type of key to allow you to pass. And some doorways are stairs to another level, with the mansion having a basement, ground floor, first floor and an attic. If you fall down a trapdoor in the floor of any of the levels, you'll end up in the secret passages. But beware, within the secret passages themselves, there is another trapdoor that abandons you with no way to escape. Pressing the D key to die appears to be the only release. Brutal. Even on the lowest difficulty level, this game is tough, and the constant health pressure feels unfair. With only 5 lives, you daren't stop for a moment, with the pause function providing the only respite. However, in the September 1986 edition of Dragon User magazine, they published some code to break into any new Microdeal, Tom Mix or Pocket Money game. Additional pokes could be added to it to cheat. One such cheat is available for this game from the World of Dragon archive, and it claims to grant infinite lives. You can type it in, but here's one I've prepared earlier using the XRAW emulator to load as a text file and resave as a CAS file. To make loading tape games easier, I've purchased this device, a Maxduino Ultimate. From a microSD card, it can load emulator tape files for machines like the BBC, Spectrum, Lynx and of course, the Dragon. It then recreates in real time the tape audio the machine can understand. There's even motor control available that the Dragon can take advantage of. The downsides are it cannot save data from a real machine, and it won't play WAV audio files. This means if it cannot understand the emulator tape files, you won't be able to play WAV files instead. So maybe not that ultimate. Does this cheat work though? Well, not from my experience. You still end up dying, and I don't have time to finish the game the hard way. Microdeal followed up Wizard's Quest with Airball in 1987. This isometric game shows the Dragon could probably have hosted a conversion of Batman or Head Over Heels if it had been a more popular machine. In this sequel, you find yourself turned into a ball by the evil wizard from the previous game, and banished to the dungeons to find and return a spellbook for him to become more powerful. Once you find the spellbook, you're given the choice between finding the things on his spellbook shopping list or dying. You also seem to have a slow leak, and you must manage your pressure carefully. Like the constantly decreasing health in Wizard's Quest, this provides the ever-present drive to move about the map as fast as you can. It's a shame both games have this constant driver though, as I think they would have been more enjoyable to play without it. You can top up your pressure at pumps dotted around the map, but be careful, too high a pressure and you burst. And with no marker for maximum pressure, that's very easy to do. I would like to say I'd gotten far into this game, but death is only a pixel away and everything seems to make you burst. Roll through a door in the wrong place and pop, there goes another life. Still, I seem to have played it better than a Star Trek actor and an evil dictator. Break time's over and it's on to the next dragon. This one has a strange problem though. The loading screen to a game will appear, but that's it. At first I thought it might be an issue with the tape loading hardware. The tape signal enters through the cassette port, goes through some components in this corner of the board, and across to pin 2 of the second Motorola peripheral interface adapter. a general input-output IC used for the keyboard, joysticks, etc. However, the logic probe shows pulses continuing throughout the load sequence, so the problem is likely somewhere else. But that's not the only issue. A memory test shows lots of bits stuck on and off in upper memory IC 39. Could these issues be linked? Well, let's replace the memory IC and see if that helps. Well, the memory error is now gone, but will it load again? Indeed it does, and you might also notice I've managed to get Flagenbird loaded on a real Dragon. Turns out Windows Media Player was cutting off the audio just before the end. Switching to VLC made it load first time. Now I have the Maxduino though, I only need to use this method on the MTX. Time for another break, and that of course means more games. Rommel's Revenge was released for the Dragon 32 in 1984. It's a clone of the 1980 arcade classic Battlezone. It's a reasonably fast and faithful clone, and as smooth as likely possible given the process speed in the Dragon. Just like the arcade version, you have to fire it where you think the enemy will be, not where it is at the moment. Although the turning increments make that a little bit difficult. Still, a worthy addition to any Dragon owner's game collection. The next Dragon on the bench has a very strange issue. Typing on the keyboard does nothing on screen, and plugging in our trusty Railrunner cartridge causes it to run very slowly. At first I wondered if it was something wrong with the timing circuit, or maybe this massive furball, but while discussing it on the Dragon Owners Facebook group, a very friendly and helpful group indeed, it was suggested it could be a faulty PIA, creating lots of CPU interrupts. Probably the one connected to the keyboard. I don't have any spare though, so I'm going to borrow the second PIA in this machine. This means cracking out the desoldering gun, as I don't want to cut this chip out just in case that's not the cause. Even with as much solder wicked away as I could manage, the chip still wouldn't release. So some gentle persuasion with a plastic tool, and the heat gun is in order, until it releases in an overly dramatic way. Repeating the same process for the second PIA, I could solder that in place of the first. Without the second PIA, the screen isn't rendered correctly, but I can see at least that the keyboard's now working. Trying a cartridge does nothing though, not surprising as the cart detection is via the second PIA, which of course is now MIA. Fitting the suspect PIA back into place of the second fixes the display, but the cartridge still won't load. Confident I needed a replacement PIA, it was back to Mutant Caterpillar Games for another order. No fancy packaging this time, but I did get a tiny Spectrum and free chocolate. Not sure where this fits on the Dragon though. Correctly packaged ICs is always good to see. I used as little solder as I could to temporarily use the suspect PIA, so it comes out reasonably easy. With the new PIA in place, everything works normally again, and I can get back to the serious task of rescuing hobos from train tracks. The next game we're going to look at is Dark Star. Published by Design Design in 1985, it comes from Rainbow Software, who had previously made Rommel's Revenge, and the shared DNA is evident from the moment the menu appears. The menus allow a myriad of configurations to tailor the controls and the difficulty to one's needs. It allows both the wrong joystick configuration, where pitching the craft down is achieved by pulling the joystick backwards, called normal, or the correct way, where pushing forward pitches the craft downwards. This it calls pilot, the method used by all serious players. If you think otherwise, please identify yourself in the comments section so I can point and laugh. When playing, you can feel the influence the original Star Wars arcade must have had on Simon Brattle, who conceived this game. This 6809 version though was coded by Ian Waring. You start the game by flying your ship called Leia in space. Your mission to liberate your galaxy from the domination by the evil lord's tyrannical empire by destroying their military bases on all the planets. How many enemy ships appear depends on how heavily defended that sector is. And you can bring up a sector map at any time. To navigate the sectors, you find a warp gate and fly through the rectangle for the direction on the map you want to go. As you pass through warp space, you must keep within the warp tunnel or lose energy. Pulsing squares, if you can fly into them, will reward you with more energy though. To reach a planet's surface, you simply fly into it. From there it's a case of navigating to a base, for which again there's a handy map. Your Leia seems to have a turning circle of an oil tanker though, and regular checks on the map are needed to ensure you're on course. Then you must battle your way to the centre and take out the central towers. Destroy all the bases and the planetary shield is lowered and you can make it back out into space to rinse and repeat. Which I haven't managed to do yet because this game is as hard as nails. That's probably why it has so many options to turn off planetary shields, missiles and even the planets themselves. It compares well with the Spectrum and CPC versions of the game, although sound on all three seems to have been an afterthought. There was a sequel released in 1986 called Forbidden Planet, but that was only available for the CPC and Spectrum. I expect by this time the declining Dragon user base wasn't worth the expense of a conversion. This last Dragon thankfully didn't show any faults, but does have something strange on board. An upturned chip that has small enamelled wires reaching through holes to points on the underside of the board, and if you look close enough you can see a couple of cut circuit board traces too. It's been done so neatly that it looks like an original factory modification. So I shared some photos of it on the Dragon user Facebook group to see if anyone else had seen this before. Nobody had, but the suggestion was it could be a 64K mod. This Dragon has a Mark I Issue 2 board and uses 8 32 kilobit RAM chips to make up 32 kilobytes of RAM. But a lot of these boards actually have 64 kilobit RAM chips that failed testing by the memory manufacturer, having a fault in either upper or lower 32 kilobits. Rather than bin them, they were sold as 32 kilobit RAM chips and marked L for low or H for high. Computer manufacturers like Dragon Data Limited could then buy these and address whichever half was good. Owners soon found out they could modify boards like this to allow all 64 kilobytes to be used. If they were lucky, the odd faulty bit wouldn't cause much of a problem. And if they were really lucky, the memory was fine and the memory manufacturer just sold excess 64 kilobit chips as 32 due to demand. But what does this additional chip do? To find out, I first mapped out all the connections. It seemed to have something to do with the two ROM ICs, but I really needed to see what type of IC was being used. The only way was to unsolder half of the mod wires to get to the chip's markings. The SN74LS00 is a quad NAND gate IC, 4 separate NAND gates in one chip. If we overlay its logic gates on the diagram, we can now figure out what it does. Like this, it's complicated to decipher, so let's lay this out more logically. The blue inputs are from the address decoder, and normally connect directly to each ROM's enable pin. To enable a ROM, this pin is pulled low, a logic 0. When pulled high, a logic 1, the ROM enters standby mode. Instead, now each connects to both inputs of a NAND gate. Looking at the NAND truth table in the lower right hand corner, you can see that this will act as a logic inverter or NOT gate, turning a 1 into a 0 and vice versa. The yellow input taps into the CPU databus read-write signal. When pulled low by the CPU, it's telling the SAM it wants to write to the databus, and when pulled high, it wants to read. The inverted ROM enable signal and the CPU databus read-write signal are then connected to the second NAND gate. So let's look at the first condition. The CPU is reading from the databus, a 1, and the decoder is signalling the ROMs to enable, a 0. With the 0 inverted to a 1, the second NAND gate has both inputs as 1, which from the truth table results in an output of 0, meaning the ROMs are enabled. But let's instead look at what happens when the CPU is writing to the databus. The decoder is still requesting the ROMs to be enabled, but this time the CPU databus read-write signal is low, a 0. With the second NAND gate having a 1 and 0 as an input, the output is pulled high, a 1, and the ROMs are disabled. So this circuit is preventing the ROMs from ever being enabled when the CPU wants to write to the databus. This is needed because the ROMs overlay 16K of the upper 32K memory map in a 64K system. And this circuit looks to prevent the ROMs from corrupting a write to the upper 32K of RAM. Well, that's at least my deduction. If you know for sure, or if you've seen this circuit in an old computer magazine, let me know, because I couldn't find it documented anywhere. The 64K mod shown on the Dragon websites is very different. Now we think we know what it does, let's get this back together and see if it really gives us 64K to play with. The old white tack has dried, so I'll restore it as it was with a fresh piece and solder those wires back. I asked on the Dragon Facebook page for ways to test this and was sent a program to type in. It felt just like the old days of typing something from a magazine and not knowing what it would do. After I typed it in, I was supposed to run it and then execute a memory location. Instead, I forgot to type run and just executed the memory location, which promptly locked up the machine. Still, I was brought up on a diet of ZX81 RAM pack wobbles, so with only a cursory sigh, I typed it back in from scratch. What does it do? On the surface, not a lot. But behind the scenes, it's copied the ROMs into RAM, meaning the character for the cursor could be changed. You want an inverse D or a 4 as your cursor? You got it. So it looks like it's working as a 64K Dragon, but with only a tape drive and no Dragon 64 ROM for 48K basic, can I do anything else with this RAM? Well, that brings us on to the last game, called Glove. It's a modern homebrew release published in 2007 by Chronosoft, and you can still buy it as a real cassette from their website. The game with first levels is on side A, with additional levels on side B. As it loads, there's a handy countdown timer, if only all tape games had one of those. What's ideal here though is it detects we have 64K of RAM and loads in all additional levels in one go. Glove is a 1 or 2 player gauntlet style game, with all the usual trimmings like generators and huge swarms of monsters to battle through. It gives you handy tips to get you on the path of enlightenment as quickly as possible. Movement is a character at a time, so no pixel scrolling here, but it does at least scroll. Keys, food and potions are all here, and there are multiple routes through the levels depending on which door you're willing to battle through to. The graphics are clear, with the 2 limited colour palettes used to good effect. The sound effects could have done with more focus though, and are purely functional, if a little hard on the ears. A fun game that will keep you amused for a while. Just maybe turn down the volume and put on a Lord of the Rings soundtrack. With all the dragons cleaned and fully working, it was time to rehome them. Some were destined to be returned to the museum's archives, but a few were going to find more fun homes. I was going to list them on a well-known auction site, but before I did, I thought I would see if there was any interest on social media, and before I knew it, I had a long list of interested people. I priced them fairly and rehomed them one at a time, ensuring each buyer was happy. One buyer was a friend of the channel and fellow YouTuber Control-Alt-Reese. With it, Reese has produced an entertaining and very detailed look at the Dragon 32 for his channel. I've included a link to his video in this video's description. So thank you to Reese and all the other buyers for both trusting my work and supporting the Museum of Computing. I'm sad to see them go, but at the same time so glad I can now move on to a new project. So until next time, goodbye.